Hello, this is Jack Jackson. In this video, we're going to talk a little bit about Jamshid al-Kashi. And al-Kashi probably should have been mentioned in our last video because he's an important Islamic mathematician of the later medieval period. Here's his full name. I'm going to try to pronounce all of this right here. He was born in 1380 and died in 1429. He was born in Kashan, which is in present-day Iran. But at least the latter part of his life, he lived, worked, and died in Samarkand, which is in present-day Uzbekistan. We know a little bit more about him than we know about some of the folks of his period because a couple of things. He dated his work, so when he was writing his materials, he put dates on them. That's a pretty important thing when you think about it from a math historian standpoint. When you don't know exactly what date things are, if the author puts a date on there, that's a pretty big help. And we also have some letters of his that survive, as well as some of his academic papers. He was very big into astronomy, and he extended the astronomical records of Nasir al-Tusi, and he dedicated his book on the subject to Ulugh Beg. He worked with Beg and Kadizada at the observatory and madrasa in Samarkand. So he was a contemporary of them. In fact, those three were the big three at that particular institution of learning. His work includes sine tables that were very accurate. For each 1 degree increment, they were accurate up to 4 sexagesimal digits, which is very, very accurate. He calculated a 16 decimal place approximation for pi, and that was a record that held for over 2 centuries. And it was the biggest advancement in quite a few years back before there was the record. He broke the record from a long ways back. One of his main books was a thing called The Key to Arithmetic, and this is probably what he's most famous for, even though his astronomical work was very important, because this one used a full use of the decimal system, predating Stevin's work from the Renaissance Europe. Much later, Stevin worked. So the decimal system, and I'm talking about not only just a base 10 place value system, but going into the decimal place values as well. And that was a big advancement. And again, that's probably the thing he's most known for. Well, if you look at these big three, Al-Kashi, Beg, and Zada at the Samarkand observatory, these mathematicians, astronomers, were really kind of the last of the really great Muslim mathematicians of the medieval period. Muslim mathematical and intellectual growth had been in decline for a while during their lifetime, but after the deaths of these three guys, and their deaths were all around the mid 1400s, the decline was great enough that the Muslim culture lost their position as the main area of mathematical advancement. So now something that often happens, unfortunately, when religious fundamentalism grows to the point that knowledge and intellectual inquiry that were not deemed important and sometimes was even considered dangerous, this is when we have a very bad trend in intellectual growth, particularly mathematical growth. And that's what happened to the Islamic culture around the time of the death of these guys here. And again, we've seen a similar trend in other cultures and religions. If you've been following along with these videos, we've talked about that before. Fortunately, about the time that we lost these three great mathematicians, conditions in Europe were changing, setting the stage for a renaissance in intellectual thought and mathematical growth, what we call now the European Renaissance period. And some people will say that the death of these guys here kind of was the end to the medieval period, and it's the start of the Renaissance period. So in our next set of videos, we'll be talking about medieval Europe, and then after that, we'll move on to the Renaissance in Europe.